Greetings, salutations, and welcome back to the Sunday Sermon. It has been a while. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone is having a lovely Sunday morning. And I hope you've all been listening to Lord Bale and my podcast over the weeks that we have not been together on this medium. It's a lot of fun. I think it provides everything that this show did and even more. And I hope you give it a shot. Next week, we'll kick off season 2. We're going to start off with some time between the Testaments. And then we're diving in to the New Testament. We're going to hang out with JC and the boys. See what's going down with those guys. Try to distill his message across all the nonsense written about him, and try to find a happy medium, something that we can all take from that man's life, and it'll hopefully not be bigoted and dickhead stuff. But anyway, welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for being here, whether you're watching this live or on the YouTubes. I appreciate it. It makes me feel like this isn't a complete waste of my time. And maybe it actually is. You can feel free to tell me that too. It's all good. So, I wanted to cover something today that doesn't get a lot of coverage, and also that we probably wouldn't talk about in the podcast, because Lord knows there's a finite amount of shit to talk about. We don't want to poach ourselves, right? But I thought about, one of the things that I think is interesting, and it's something that comes up on the podcast a lot, is the amount of editing that was done in the Bible. There was a lot of editing. A lot of things were changed to fit a narrative. Things were omitted, inserted, revamped, reworked, redone. It's a mess. And what is specifically interesting to me, actually, is how bad some of the edits are. It's one thing to gracefully edit something and slide in a reference to something else, or maybe reword something a specific way so that, it makes more sense that way or another way. But to just out and out, rework something and have it be so clunky that it's obvious that it's been reworked. That to me is the rub, right? Anybody, if that's the goal, I think, as an editor, right, is for people to not know that you were there. It's kind of like the old Futurama trope with God, that if he does too much, people become wholly dependent on him, and if he does nothing, they lose faith. So the idea is for him to do just enough that you question if he's real or not, but you don't really know that he's there. And that is honestly what a good editor does. You can tell that the text, excuse me, you can tell that the text flows well, it tells a cohesive story, and perhaps you're not even sure that someone reworked this after the original author, right? That's when an editor's really doing a good job. Whoever that good editor is, he did not edit the Book of Numbers. The Book of Numbers is one of the most heavily redacted and edited books in the Bible. It was originally from a Yahwist or Elohist source. Somebody who believed in the big fucking space dragon, somebody who was really into the more mystical aspects of the religion, and somebody who probably, at least when they first wrote it, was not monotheistic. And so you've got all that, and eventually, and he was not a priest. That is wholly evident, that this was a lay person, probably an elder or a scribe attached to an elder, something like that, who wrote this down. But then a priest got a hold of it and said, hey, we need to edit this and make it fit our narrative. And they pretty much edited it with a machete and a glue stick, because it's just all over the place. And I mean, it's got more narrative mistakes and plot holes than Twilight. characters' motivations constantly change, and one of my more interesting things that I notice a lot in the Book of Numbers is you will have a story in this chapter, and then you will go to the next chapter, and it's almost like a cartoon where nothing that happened in the previous chapter has any relevance to this chapter. And characters will say things in one chapter and then completely contradict them, or their motivations will go completely against that in the next chapter. And it could really be stark. And I often wonder if that is the reason that when stories are pulled from a lot of these older books, that's one of the things that they do is they cherry pick the story, that specific chapter, or maybe even just a segment of a chapter. And, of course, my neighbor decides he's going to cut his grass. So. Let's just deal with that. And, it doesn't, in the moment, if you just go with that story, it's fine. But if you try to read the chapter before and chapter after, oftentimes it makes the story itself really confusing. Like, it doesn't add up. And that's what we're going to do today. I thought it would be fun to take a little 4-chapter run that should have a fairly cohesive narrative because it's a linear part of the story. This happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But whoever edited this together missed that memo because Moses seems like he's on a manic episode in these we're going to read 4 chapters. Or we're going to work with 4 chapters. I'm not going to sit here and read 4 chapters. You can do that on your own. But Moses just completely he's having a manic episode or something, because one minute he wants this and the next minute he wants that, and he doesn't reference that he wanted this, and now he doesn't care that he wanted that. The people around him don't really seem to pay any attention to what he's doing. It's a whole vibe. It really is very, very strange. So let's take a look at the Book of Numbers. We're going to start in chapter 11. We're going to do 11, 12, 13, and 14. A little backstory here. At this point, where we're at, the Hebrews have escaped Egypt. They've gone through the desert. They've gotten the 10 Commandments, all that good stuff. And they are getting close to Canaan. And now I would say that most people listening have heard me reference it, or you just have existed in the world and not been a complete clod, and you've heard that the Hebrews wandered in the desert for 40 years. What we're going to get to is why. Why did what should have taken them about a week take them 40 years? Why did this trek take so long? That's what we're going to address today, and with the stories of why that happened. What made the big fucking space dragon so mad that he decided to, recalculate their route for 40 years. And there's also a great little story about racism and just some other nonsense. So let's have some fun with it. Welcome back to the Sunday Sermon. I'm so glad you're all here. So let's jump to our handy dandy visual aid. There it is. You know it. You love it. It's the PowerPoint. I know you've all missed that that's the one thing that we don't have on a podcast, is we're not doing video yet, and also I'm not making one of these for each podcast. So you get them when you get them, so enjoy them now, because who knows when you'll get one of these again, right? So let's dive in, shall we? Alright, so we're going to take this by the numbers, because I like puns. It's the Bible. If you don't like puns, you're in the wrong book. The Book of Numbers is the 4th book in the Bible, 36 chapters, 1,289 verses, 32,896 words. Is that relevant? No. But fuck you, I like stats. It is a priestly edit, as I said. Textly Day, somebody in the priesthood took this and said, hey, this doesn't jive with any of our shit. We gotta fix this. How can we fix this? I know. We'll just chop it up and make it make sense. And it does not make sense. So whoever did that, you failed. Horrifically. It is a study in contrast. It's a really weird book. If you asked most people about the Book of Numbers, they would tell you, isn't that just like genealogies and stuff? And for the most part, there's a lot of that. Like I said, 36 chapters. The first 10, so almost first third of the book, is just all genealogies, and it's the results of a big military census, and Moses does. He's trying to assess his fighting force. How big is my army? Do I have enough guys to undertake this massive, invasion? Even though, wouldn't they be able to do it with like 2 guys? Because God's on their side. They have a fucking pet dragon. But I digress. So that's just kind of your backstory of this book. But yeah, there's 36 chapters in the book. Almost half of them, I want to say 18 or 19 of them, are genealogical records. Then the other half are batshit insane stories. Like, this is the book, whoever was editing this went off the rails and was like, we got to make this interesting. So we'll put in all this boring genealogy stuff, and then let's spice it up with the craziest stories you've ever heard. And I'm here for it. So let's dive in. Chapter 11. We're going to start in Chapter 11. It's a good place to start. In Chapter 11, the people have been wandering through the desert for a while, and they've been eating manna. Everybody's heard about manna. It rains down from the heaven each night. They go gather it in the morning, and they can make bread with it. There have been a whole lot of exploratory experiments to try to figure out what the hell manna was. And one of the leading candidates is that it is some kind of protein excreted by insects, and that they would have left this on tree bark or whatever, and it would have done this overnight. That's why it would have been there in the mornings when the Hebrews woke up. If that sounds gross, it is. And they got sick of it. They had been eating this nonstop for quite some time, and they had kind of had enough. So they start barking, and they say, we're sick of this. We want something else to eat. Come on, Moses. What's the deal? When we lived in Egypt, we ate really good food, and it didn't cost us anything. And now we're out here in the desert with you eating locust shit, and we're really not into it. And, well, the BFSD, there's one thing he does not have. It's a complaints department. He has a smiting department. If you send something to complaints, you just get smote. That's how it works. And that's kind of the recurring theme of Numbers. The people complain, God smites. They beg Moses to stop the smiting. He intervenes. And, that's one of the ways Moses becomes kind of a precursor to Jesus. People can't save themselves. They need Moses to do it for them. And that is really a big part of this. Much like the book of Judges. We talked about Judges, one of our favorite books. And that it's the action movie sequence. People screw up. People get, taken out. They get enslaved. The people cry out. God raises up a leader. Leader delivers them. He rules for a while. Rinse and repeat. Numbers kind of has that same archetype. It's, this is very similar. All of this, these narrative devices, they were what worked. Why mess with what works? So they just kept at it. So let's look at this first story. Because really, what I think is important is the translation really matters. When the people are complaining about not liking the food that they've been given to eat, they lodge their complaint. And depending on what translation you read, you can see how strong their complaint is and how heavily worded it is, and perhaps why the BFSD got so mad about it. So we'll start with the classic King James Version. This is probably the one most people met during their childhood. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? They want some meat. We remember the fish, which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. They spelled garlic that way, not me. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all. beside this manna before our eyes. Now, a couple things to pick up on there. The mixed multitude. That would lead you to believe that it's not just Hebrews here, that they've got some hangers on. They've picked up some people in the desert along the way. Their wagon train has swelled on their trip. And because it kind of specifically separates those two there. They mention all the great stuff they got for free in Egypt, and their soul is dried away. Like, it's literally crushing them. They're not just complaining like, oh, I'm hungry. They're literally saying that it's killing them. It's sucking their will to live, that they have to keep eating the same crap every day. Now let's look at the New International. This is a version Bale and I use a lot on the podcast, and it is probably the default standard version that most people use today, I would say. The rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. Now, this one's a little interesting. There's some divisiveness there. They're not the mixed multitude anymore, which is just, the large group of people, some Hebrews, some not. Now it's the rabble with them. Very clearly stating that this was started by the people who are not the Hebrews. This is started by these other people that are traveling with them. Again, you can look at this as kind of, one of those pogroms, if you will, against hanging out with other people. You mix with them, look what happens. They convince you that what you're eating isn't good enough and that you should have to eat something else. That, that what God is providing is not good enough. You need more. But yet, at the end, it takes some of the sting out of it. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. It's not, oh, it's crushing my soul. I don't have the will to live anymore. It's just, I'm sick of it. I'm not hungry for this anymore. It definitely takes some of the sting off of it. While in the first part, it much more directly assigns the blame to the non-Hebrews. The blame is on the guys that are hanging out with them, not directly on the Hebrews. Then we go with my preferred translation, the Young's literal translation, which is about as close to the original text as you're going to get. It also calls them the rabble, and the rabble who are in its midst have lusted greatly, and the sons of Israel also turn back to weep, and say, who doth give us flesh? We have remembered the fish which we do eat in Egypt for naught, the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic, and now our soul is dry, and there is not anything save the manna before our eyes. Are you following these idiots here? Think about that for a minute. What we just saw there. These people have stated, look what they're remembering. They're not remembering their supposed time of enslavement in Egypt. They're remembering that they ate for free. That, hey, remember when we used to eat all that food the Egyptians gave us? Now, that, adds an interesting kind of bit of context to this. Are they remembering it that way because they weren't actually slaves? They were indentured servants, and the text, to be more sympathetic to them, called them slaves, or that they were just hired workers, and maybe they weren't treated the best, but they weren't slaves, and that a lot of that early stuff was propaganda? Or is it really that they are that sick of manna that they're like, you know what, I would rather go back and be a slave to not have to eat this stuff again? You can go either way. I don't think it's super germane to this story. The point is that the people, they're really, really complaining. That's what we need to take away from this. They are sick of this manna. So, they complain to Moses. They talk about, again, in the literal translation, that you see the phrase, also turn back and weep. Like, they literally are looking back towards the direction they came. Like, maybe we should just go back. We're going to sit here in the desert and just eat this crap. And At this point, they haven't got to Canaan yet. They're starting to wonder, is this even going to happen? Is this wonderful place even real? Or did Moses sell us a bridge in Brooklyn and we're out here now eating, locust shit and wandering around? This sucks. We should have just gone back. We should just go back to Egypt. So Moses has a complete breakdown at this point. Moses loses his shit. He goes to God and goes, have you heard them? Have you heard these crying, whining people? I can't stand them. They really suck. I can't deal with them. Am I their father? You put them on me. You gave them to me. I never asked for this. I never said I wanted this. Why am I just going to be stuck babysitting these people forever? They're idiots. They're caterwauling children. I don't want to deal with them. And it's too much. It's too much, God. It's too much. The big fucking space dragon goes, calm down. He goes, look, you all right. Do you need some help? Do you need some help? Tell you what, go get 70 leaders from the tribe. Get a couple guys from every tribe. No, 12 does, 12, divide that into 70. It doesn't. That's fine. But go get 70 guys, bring them up here. I'll let them help you out. So Moses goes and gets 70 guys from the tribe, and they all come up to the tabernacle where Moses is, and the tent of understanding, and the Spirit of the Lord. It states that it took some of Moses' power. This is seriously like some Dragon Ball shit here. That it takes some of Moses' power level and disperses it among the other 70. Now Moses still retains a lot of power, but he spreads some of his power out to these other 70. And the text says that they begin prophesying. The translation, it doesn't really mean they started like actually giving prophecies. It almost means they had like epileptic seizures. They started speaking in tongues. They started, having visions, all this craziness. And one wonders if that's what Moses is talking about, is that the kind of like the scene at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy where Star-Lord, has to hold hands with everybody because even for him, holding on to the power of the Soul Stone is too much. Well, that's kind of, you wonder if what Moses was really complaining about here is like that all this power from God was too much for him. And so he wants to share that load and spread the voltage out, so to speak. So these 70 guys come up there. Well, 2 of them, they start doing this in front of the people, which, while it wasn't said they weren't supposed to, it strongly indicated that they were supposed to do this in private. And then they would go back and be able to lead their people with more effectively, because it'd be like, hey, Moses, he shared a little with us. Like, we've got the power too. So you don't have to bother Moses for everything. You can come talk to us first. And if it's too big for us, we'll go get Moses. But basically trying to add middle managers. And these 2 guys, they let everybody see them doing the thing. And the other 68 guys go to Moses and go, hey, what are you doing? Like, you can't let them get away with that. And Moses says, do you think that, this divine power is the only reason I'm in charge? Chill, bro. It's fine. He's like, I wish everybody had the power, because then I wouldn't have to do this. Again, Moses making it very clear he does not want to be in charge. He doesn't want this responsibility. He's sick of this shit. And so then Moses starts talking to God, and God goes, so, you can tell those fuckers, clean themselves up, get ready. They want meat. Meat's coming. All the meat's coming. More meat than they could ever imagine is coming. And Moses kind of doubts God for a minute and goes, you're going to get so much meat. Do you realize how many people are here? There are like 2 million people here, which there couldn't possibly have been, but that's their numbers. We're just playing with them. So there's 2 million people here, man. Where are you going to get meat, that much meat for 2 million people? And God just kind of laughs at Moses and goes, do you think my arms are too short? And the reason he uses that phrase is we're given the idea that literally the hand of God reaches down and just shoves a flock of quail, like the biggest flock of quail ever, right into the Hebrew camp, and to where the Hebrews wake up, and there are quail piled up like 5 feet deep everywhere for as far as the eye can see. And the Hebrews are like, fuck yeah, dinner time. And then the absolute minute they start eating that stuff, they all get really, really sick and start dropping dead left and right. And Moses asks God, what's the deal? And God goes, oh yeah, it's kind of like poison meat, because fuck them. I'll teach you to bitch about what I feed you. You'll eat what you're given, and you'll like it. And so that valley is named the Valley of the Tombstones, or the Graves of Craving, or Graves of Lust, depending on which translation you go with. And that is another kind of theme that reruns here, is on this Exodus, their march towards Canaan. The Hebrews screw up in places and then rename the valley after what they screwed up in, or rename that spot of the map after their screw up. It's a very bizarre practice. It's very strange. But yeah, this is so weird here, because it's like this guy edited 2 stories into one. Story number 1 is that the big fucking space dragon does not have a complaint department. He has a fuck you department. They've been eating manna. They reminisce about how well they were fed as slaves. He gives them millions of quail to eat, then causes them all to get sick, and many of them die. The exact text states that the food was still in their mouth when they started dying. They were still chewing it, so immediately they die. But then we also have story number 2 in the same chapter, that Moses tells him he can't do it anymore. He doesn't want to be responsible for them. Helps them spread the load. And 2 of them go rogue, but Moses isn't worried about it. So, and it's really clunky, because the stories are kind of like sandwiched around each other. It starts off with the people complaining about the food. Then it goes to Moses freaking out about he can't do this anymore. Then the people say maybe we should, go back. Then Moses shares his power. Then God gives everyone poison quail. I don't know what he was doing, whoever edited this. It reads, it's a bipolar story. You can't tell what the actual narrative focus is supposed to be, because it keeps shifting between the 2. It is super clunky, super odd, but apparently don't complain about what God gives you, or he'll give you poisoned birds. So there are some definite anti-monarchy themes. Let's look at the themes that you may have not picked up from this story. Moses maintains executive control through the divine mandate, but he agrees to share power. This helps legitimize the elders. At this point, the hierarchy is this ragtag group of people and Moses. By him doing his little stunt with the 70 elders, he has elevated them among the common man. He has given the people representatives that he has sanctioned, even though he still himself is maintaining supreme executive control. He has now created a system where he doesn't have to be the only guy to make decisions. He has legitimized these other 70 guys. Again, we talked about, there's a pattern here that keeps popping up throughout this book. People murmur, they complain. Big fucking space dragon smites. People beg Moses to intervene. Moses prays. Big fucking space dragon goes, alright. And then people name the place after their transgression. This happens like 10 times in this innocuous little book. It's just very much like Judges, where that's the action movie storyline. This is the Jesus storyline. People do something bad. People are punished. They beg Moses to intervene. Moses talks to his dad. Jesus talks to his dad. Moses talks to the big fucking space dragon. Bails the people up. It's very important too to realize that with the Moses story, Moses does a lot of bartering with God and negotiating. There's not like magic words. It's not like Moses steps in and goes, okay, I think they've had enough. Moses, you can kind of tell every time Moses asks the big fucking space dragon to, back off, he's got this kind of feeling like, he might not listen. One of these times I'm going to ask him to stop smiting, and he's not going to stop smiting. He's just going to keep on smiting on. Eldad and Medad. I told you there were two guys out of the 70 that didn't follow the script. They went rogue and kind of showed their power in front of the people. They're never mentioned again, and nothing happens to them, which is, very different from just not too much earlier in timeline-wise and in Exodus. You had the two guys who light the incense sticks wrong, and fire comes out and consumes them. So we have this kind of narrative imbalance. Sometimes minor offenses are met with dragon fire, and sometimes they're ignored. Who knows? But in Jewish folklore, they prophesied a war with Gog and Magog. This is a popular eschatological prophecy that is popular with messianic cults. They believe that this Gog and Magog will attack Israel, and that's when the Messiah comes back. Gog Magog is the name of a Welsh giant from folklore that sometimes, in some cultures, became the giant from Jack the Beanstalk. I think that's kind of fun. That if you find versions of Jack and the Beanstalk that were written many, many years ago in either Wales or other parts of England, you get Gog Magog is the giant fee fi fo fum. I think that's kind of fun, seeing as that's apparently who these two guys, they were giving a prophecy about the Messiah. And I've heard some people claim that is why that was actually the complaint, was that they were making like a messianic, prophecy, which wouldn't make any sense all the way back then. And that's what the elders were mad about, was that these guys were already they were doing end of the world doom prophecies while people are wandering around in the woods complaining about that they're starving. They're wandering around the desert complaining they're starving to death, which I can see why that wouldn't go over well. So now let's move on to chapter 12. Chapter 12 is a doozy. This is a really interesting chapter that probably more churches should speak on. This chapter is all about racism. So we all know that Moses was married to Zipporah. What a lot of people don't know is that Moses takes a second wife. And she is a Cushite woman. Where would that be? Well, that would be Ethiopia, below Egypt. Where he found this woman when they were going north on that map towards Israel, I'm not sure. But at some point, while he's in the desert, Moses marries this woman from Cush. And so she's very dark-skinned. That apparently does not go over well with certain people. So he got married again. We know Zipporah wasn't from Cush because we have the whole thing with Jethro, her father-in-law. They live, over towards Midian, so definitely could not be her. But so this has to be a second marriage for Moses. The fact that the only detail we have about this woman is her country of origin is a big deal. The authors could have just said Moses took another wife. They could have said Moses took a wife and her name was blah. Instead, the only detail that we get about this woman is that she was from Cush. And we've talked about it on this show, we've talked about it on the podcast. When they include specific details, it's because those details matter. And what is very clearly, what you're supposed to take away from this, is that she was very dark-skinned. Now, some people will try to say that this is about Moses taking a second wife. It's not. Follow the story. So Miriam, Moses' sister, and her brother Aaron, they come up to Moses and they go, hey, you took her as a wife? You're married to that black chick? Dude, not cool. Well, you know what? We think you are hoarding all the executive power. You need to share your power with everybody and let everyone have a say. And the wording is very specific that it is Miriam that is browbeating Moses about this. Aaron doesn't say anything, but he stands with her, and we're led to believe that Aaron is nodding along in approval. Like, yep, why do you get to be in charge? I'm the older brother. Remember that theme? It's been running through all of our stories, that the younger brother usurping the older brother. Once again, Aaron is the older brother. Why is he's the one with the silver tongue? Why is he not the one in charge here? Why is it Moses? And Miriam, who would have been an older sister, kind of feels the same way. Yet, if you just remember, in the very previous chapter, Moses just explicitly stated that he did not want to be in charge. He didn't want anything to do with this, and he would happily cede all of his power to the other people. That this wasn't him who asked to be in charge. God is making him be in charge. So her complaint, it seems kind of odd. It more seems that her complaint is a personal one. Her complaint is the first instance of sibling rivalry, which litters Genesis and Exodus. Sibling rivalry is a huge part of those two books. Yet in the Moses story, this is the first time it comes up. And that's a little bit of a departure. But yet, that has to be what this is about. Because Moses has now already ceded part of his power to 70 other guys. So Miriam is bitching more about the fact that she and supposedly Aaron feel left out of that power structure. But yet, she's not saying you didn't give me and Aaron power. She's saying you're hoarding all the power, even though that is factually untrue. So then what happens is the big fucking space dragon gets real mad. And he curses Miriam. She gets leprosy. And it's a very specific kind. Leprosy, yes, there's a disease called leprosy. Leprosy is also used in the Old Testament for any kind of skin disease. It's not always actual leprosy. They use that word interchangeably. But he does that, and he gives her this leprosy, and it turns her ashen white, like ghostly pale, which is kind of funny, seeing as her reasoning for why Moses was unfit was that he married a black woman. So she gets a disease that turns her super white. I point to that, to people who say this was her saying that Moses he married an outsider and that it wasn't about her being black. Then why does the text specifically mention that her curse from God turned her the whitest shade of white? Obviously, what's going on here is God is rebuking her for being a racist bitch. It's kind of an odd place for this story. As I pointed out, they complain. Miriam says, we've done prophecies too, so why are we not part of the power structure? And again, they're accusing Moses of hoarding power, even though he's clearly not hoarding power. He just shared it with 70 fucking people. Miriam takes the lead, and she gets the punishment. Miriam is the one who verbally complained, even though the translation makes it very clear that Aaron was standing with her and that she was speaking on his behalf. But she is the only one who is then stricken with a disease that ironically turns her ashen white. And I guess you can sort of take from this that it's okay to feel some kind of way about something, but when you go and actually complain about it, then you become responsible for it, because it's very clear from the text that Aaron agreed with everything Miriam said, but he kept his mouth shut. Or maybe he tolerates misogyny but not racism. Maybe. And Aaron and Moses are contrasted by the conclusion here. So you've got Miriam. She's been turned white. They're afraid she's going to die. Aaron goes and he gives this long, elaborate speech. he goes on and on about how this is such a raw deal for Miriam. We can't let this happen to her. And what's really funny is he makes a contrast between her looking like a stillborn baby and what's, like a baby that's been died during the birth process, how pale she is. And he's doing that to remind Moses, this is your sister. He's reinforcing that familial bond. Like, hey, I know she spoke out. I know God's mad, but dude, come on. It's our sister. Moses, by contrast, only states just a couple words. In the actual Hebrew translation, he says 5 words. Heal her now. Oh, he says, God, pray, heal her, pray. The NIV translates it to heal her now, oh God, I pray. But that's it. Aaron gives this big, long-winded speech. And again, we're reminded multiple times that Aaron is the raconteur of the group. Aaron is the one who is given the gift of gab. And I think that it's very interesting that a priest edited this, because the priests were often the ones known for making religion bigger and more elaborate than it needed to be. Yet what you see here is an indictment of that Aaron makes this big speech and whatever, and it's contrasted by Moses, who actually gets something done, just speaks a couple words. And he just makes a few words. Miriam is healed. She's back in the group, and perceivably she keeps her mouth shut. So it's really, and again, I think it's important to look at what was pointed out in this story. They pointed out that it was a Cushite woman, and that's what she calls Moses out on. So she calls Moses out for marrying the black girl. She gets turned pasty white, and Moses has to intercede on her behalf, and she's made whole, and we never hear about this complaint again. I would say this is as strong of a Bible advocacy against racism as you could find. And I also think that this story is really interesting, that all the segregationists who preached against miscegenation, this story was there the whole time, you fucking twats. Like, it was right there. But whatever. Chapter 13. Now we're really getting to some fun here. This is the spy mission. So at this point in our story, Miriam is now a normal color again. The camp has made it to the outskirts of Canaan. They're on the other side of kind of a hill, and Canaan is on the other side. The land that was promised is right there. So Moses is told by God, get one guy of military prowess. This is very specific. He's told not to get the leaders, not the same elders that he, laid this, shared his power with. No. Go get somebody that knows military shit and get 12 of them, one from each tribe, and send them in. Send them in to do some scouting. So the guys go in and they spend 40 days scouting the area. Going all over the place, sneaking around, seeing what they can see. And what they see, they come back and they tell people, we are fucked. There are giants, the descendants of the Nephilim. There's giants. They describe the land as very good. There's one part where they reference grapes being so big that it would need 2 men to carry a bunch of grapes. But that the people are also giants. We're screwed. And so the implication is that these men were of military prowess. So that makes their report all the more shameful and sobering. Only Caleb and Joshua have any faith that they can take Canaan. The other 10 guys are like, we have no chance. We should turn around. Let's go back to Egypt again, because we cannot fight these people. They're giants. We're going to get stomped, dude. Caleb and Joshua don't dispute that the land looks pretty tasty and that, there's some big bads there. They don't dispute that at all. But they're like, God brought us this far. He can do it. we can take this. The other 10 guys are like, are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. Scouts speak about giant fruits and people. They're not calling the people giant fruits. Don't be immature. The lusciousness of the land is contrasted with the fearsomeness of its inhabitants. And Joshua and Caleb, again, they don't dispute it. They just say God's going to see them through. This is the last time the Nephilim are mentioned in the Bible. And what I find interesting is that when Joshua does his, conquest of the land, they never mention him fighting giants. Even though, again, he's right here not disputing that there's giants. Caleb gives the people a speech and says, we can do this. What are you being so scared for? Look at everything that you've seen and you still don't think God can do this? He's like, do you remember the plagues? All that stuff. The other scouts then change their story. They start saying, we've seen this land literally devour its people. Which seems strange when you contrast it with the fact that they had just said how great it was. Unless you look at it from the standpoint that they may have been talking about the geographic location. Israel is at a crossroads there. And the Egyptian kingdoms in the south, the Syrian and eventually Roman and Greek kingdoms will be north of them. That this is kind of a prescient statement that if we live here, we will fight constantly. We will always have people coming to try to take this land away from us. The land will devour us because we'll constantly be fighting to defend it. And that is actually a pretty accurate take on things. And so they're saying, for that reason, nah, fam, we're not going there. Well, there's a little bit of foreshadowing there with who the heroes of the story are. Because the clear heroes here are Joshua and Caleb. They're the two that say, we're not afraid. We'll go in there. We'll do it. And the reason that those two are the two that come off as the heroes is pretty apparent. Caleb, it's mentioned, is from the tribe of Judah. And what they're doing right here is signaling that the tribe of Judah is going to be the important tribe. They are the tribe that David comes from, Solomon, Jesus. They're all descendants from the tribe of David. Joshua, of course, is who goes on to lead the invasion of Canaan. So this story really is about showing the people kind of doubting God again, but also allowing us to see the two guys that don't doubt. The two guys that actually are not afraid and are going to go in there and get the job done. Again, one of the scouts states that the people would have looked like grasshoppers fighting the Canaanites. But yet, they're curiously absent in Joshua's story. Now, what is interesting is some people have tried to say, well, maybe they encountered the Philistines and saw guys like Goliath, and those are the giants. But that wouldn't check out because with the way they mention that the Canaanites range all the way from the coast to the interior. And this would have been in around 1300 BCE, which makes sense because the Philistines didn't get to the Promised Land until around the Bronze Age collapse 100 years later. So them saying the Canaanites ranged all the way to the sea, that makes sense. The Philistines hadn't showed up and driven them off the coast yet. So that adds up, but it also means that it couldn't have been that they saw the Philistine giants that supposedly they had due to inbreeding or whatever reason you want to believe, because the Philistines weren't there yet. So where are these giants? Nobody ever mentions them again. But yet, the terms that are used in the original text give us no reason to believe that these guys were speaking hyperbolically. We're not given any reason to believe that they meant anything other than literal giants. So I've always found that very interesting about this story is whoever edited it made sure that they told you that these weren't like, oh, these people are big or there's a lot of them and it's going to be tough to fight. It's no, these people are fucking giants. There are monster giants there. But then when they tell the stories later about conquering the land, nobody mentions fighting any giants, and I feel like that's a detail you would have mentioned. Yeah, again, I think that you could posit that what he's really hinting at is, and some people have said that maybe the giants he's talking about, they're meaning empires. That if he, if he fights, if we go here, we're going to constantly have all the world's superpowers coming to try to smack us around. The text that they use doesn't imply that, but could it be just poor translation over many years? Absolutely, it could be. So, the fallout from that is God flips shit. He has lost it at this point. He says, you know what, Moses? You know what? I've had it with these people. I'm going to smite every one of them out here in the desert. I'm going to kill every single stinking one of them. And then I'm going to start over. And you will be the father of a great nation. Forget that Abraham guy that I made a deal with all those years back. Fuck him. You will be the guy that goes forward and, leads my people. And Moses goes, wait. If you remember, just a couple chapters earlier, that was Moses' exact complaint. These aren't even my people. I'm not their father. I'm not their ancestor. Why am I responsible for them? And so God creates a nightmare for him by telling him, hey, tell you what, I'm going to kill everybody and you're going to be in charge. And they'll all be your direct descendants, which is not what Moses wants at all. The people are rebelling, though. They've had it. Despite everything that they've seen, they say they should go back. In fact, they double down and say, you know what, let's elect a new leader to take us back to Egypt. Because we can't win in Canaan. Obviously, Moses is not going to be popular back in Egypt. Let's get somebody else and follow him back. And they, in some translations, you're led to believe they actually start forming the column to march back. And that's when God loses his shit and says, I'm killing everybody. Moses, he takes a really interesting tact with God here. Moses goes, wait. You're not thinking this through. Because wasn't the whole point of the 10 plagues and everything that we did in Egypt not just to liberate the people? He implies that God could have done that without the plagues. He goes, the whole point of it was to show everybody that the big fucking space dragon is the supreme being. He's above all else, and he can do anything. He goes, but if you get these people all the way out here, and then you kill them all, everybody's going to say, oh man, God, yeah, he could rescue them from the Egyptians, but he couldn't get them into Canaan. Yeah, he couldn't do it. So he's not as powerful as he'd like you to believe. Moses really plays that card. And it works. God goes, all right, I'll do it. Now, one of the people's big complaints is that if they go attack the Canaanites, that they'll die. And when they die, their women and children will be taken as plunder. They're like, we should go back to Egypt. Conveniently forgetting that Pharaoh had placed a death sentence on all male children. And that would just allow him to further exploit the women and other children. Remember that? The whole Moses story? Why he gets put in the basket and all that? They conveniently forget that when their big fear is, well, if we fight, we might die. And who will take care of the children? They'll just be slaves. Let's just go back and be slaves without us dying. That's their rationale. And as I said, God's solution is, the worst nightmare. Moses, so he panics. He tells God, look, I can't be the leader of your nation. And if you kill all these people, everybody will say you did that because you couldn't get them into Canaan. So God says, fine. But nobody here is getting in. Nobody here is getting in to the promised land. So yeah, Moses basically hints to God, you got to save face, right? You can't, you'll look bad in front of the other gods. So God decides, all right, anybody over 20, basically the age of military service or womanhood. Yes, people got married younger than that, but they were often still referred to as children or as young women. Once you hit about 20, you were really a woman proper. As a man, you were expected to be fighting in the military at that point. Anybody that age, you don't get to go to Canaan. In fact, the language is really harsh. The language God uses when he talks about wiping them out, he uses the term slaughter, and the word that he actually uses there is almost never used with humans. It's used with livestock. At that point, God is referring to the Hebrews like livestock. He's like, just wipe them out and start over. And so then, when he says, okay, fine, I'm not going to kill everybody. The kids, they can eventually get in. But if you're 20 or over, you're dying in the wilderness. He says you will drop as a corpse. Again, it's really harsh language. So you can tell that he has bought Moses's, little gambit that if you kill everybody, you won't look very powerful. I would argue that wiping out millions of people like that would look pretty powerful. But Moses, he's able to talk him into it. But God is really harsh. And he goes, you're going to wander the desert 1 year for every day that you spent exploring the land. And only Caleb and Joshua will get to go in. Even Moses is not going to be allowed to go in. And it's really interesting because to this point, Moses is like the one guy that God doesn't really seem to get mad at, other than that, brief minute where Moses didn't circumcise his son fast enough, so God tried to kill him and Zipporah had to step in and save the day. But other than that, for the most part, God doesn't really get mad at Moses. But yet, there's some implication here that Moses has to suffer because of his intercession, by rejecting God's offer to start over and have him be the father of this nation, as well as the fact that he repeatedly defends these whining, sniveling, complaining people, that God has decided, all right, fine. You know what? You're going to die in the desert with them. You don't get to go into Canaan either. And it's kind of brutal. And one thing that it parallels the story of David. David is a warrior. And that's always at God's behest, for the most part. And yet, when he wants to build the temple, God says, nah, you're a man of war. You can't build my temple. Even though most of David's wars were on God's behalf to enlarge the kingdom and, make Israel a great nation. But yet God's like, yeah, no, you don't get to be the one. You can get all the stuff for it, but you have to die. And your son Solomon, who hasn't gone and fought any wars, he's going to be the guy that'll build my temple. And it kind of seems like God's doing that here. He says, Moses, you've done a great job, but you know what? I really wanted to smite all these people. And you wouldn't. You talked me out of it, so fine, I'm not going to smite them. But your boy Joshua, he and Caleb, they're going to lead the people into the land and conquer the land. You die in the dusty desert with all these assholes. And then, for some reason, at the very end of the story, Moses tells the people, all right, we're not going into Canaan. We're going to go wander around because you said, you're afraid of it anyway. A bunch of them go, you know what? Nah, we're not going to go wander. We're going to go attack. Moses and Aaron are like, you're on your own, homie. And no, you can't take the Ark of the Covenant with you either. But I'm not stopping you. Go ahead. And the people who attack get annihilated. Some scholars have posted that maybe this was a deliberate suicide mission. That when they realize that their alternative to attacking Canaan is that they're going to wander around in the desert. And that God has already told them, you are going to wander in the desert until everybody 20 and older is dead. Then you can go into Canaan, they're like, you know what? Let's die. Let's go into Canaan. Let's circumvent God's words there. And yeah, we're gonna get killed, but I'd rather go out on my shield than drop dead in the desert. And I don't know if that's heroic, but it certainly kind of seems like the Nimrodian way of thumbing your nose at God and just kind of deciding that you're going out on your own terms. I think it's kind of badass, myself personally, that these guys, they realized they had screwed up, and God had told them, this is it, I'm taking you out. You're going to wander as punishment. They're like, heck, your punishment. I'll go out with a spear in my hand rather than go out dropping dead in the desert, wandering around while the GPS is recalculating for the next 40 years. So that's our story today. And yeah, if none of that tracked logically and didn't really follow a cohesive narrative, congratulations. You're apparently a better editor than the guy who edited this all those many years ago. But I think that's what makes it interesting to me when you do it like this, is that people love to cherry pick single stories out of the Bible to prove a point. And I get the desire to do that, and it's certainly narratively easier to do that. But when you do that, you lose context. And context matters. Especially when it's nonsensical context like this that doesn't jive with each other. Because if nothing else, it shows you that what you're reading is an editorial, not a historical document. And so when reading editorials is fine. Just remember that you're reading an editorial and that somebody wrote that with an agenda, not just to inform. So I hope everybody has a great rest of their Sunday. I'm going to go watch football. I hope you do whatever makes you happy. And remember to always question your sources. Thanks, everybody.